So coming off of her win, Cris Cyborg has obviously been pretty upset with the UFC, and right now she's just going scorched earth. So I'm going to play a clip from the Helwani show, and then I'm going to show what she's been talking about on Twitter, and then just kind of break down whether or not I feel like she's on base or off base with it. It'll be a little bit accelerated just to get through the full clip, but here we go.
I think Dana White is supposed say I'm sorry what everything he's doing for me. I suffer bully, abuse. You go in my Instagram, every people call me, I'm a man, I have a dick, because the joke he's doing. Okay, take a little. He did the joke about I look like Wanderlei Silva in the dress. A lot of people go to my Instagram, do this. I suffer bully. Where is the code for you cannot have this? He's the boss. How is the boss? Make fun. They are athlete. It's a girl. Say she should have a penis. She's a guy. They have to have rules. This is not right. I have a daughter. I have mom. I have a dad. My daughter had a problem in school already because this. I don't think it's cool. I think he's a bully guy, and I think he's have to pay what he's doing. He's damaged my brand, my self-esteem. Because I'm strong. Because I don't let the things make a problem for me, but make with my family this, and I think this has to change. But he don't change. He don't change. He's lie. He's continue doing this. Continue bullying me, and who's going to stop him? Who's the boss to him? He's have a boss. He's supposed to have a boss. Who's going to stop him? He says, right, you work for someone, your boss, and he's bullying you, and you have to continue working. And then people say, I'm hard to work, but I'm not. I love my job. I have a
Yeah, for whatever reason, the clip broke up there, but I think a lot of the important stuff's in there. So before I go to what she said, one of the points that she made was that she felt as though Dana White was doing a really bad job of bullying her and that he was the boss. It's worth noting that the clip that she was referring to where he said that she looked like Wanderlei Silva in a dress happened before she signed with the UFC. So you could say, in theory, if she really had such an issue with what Dana White said, she shouldn't have signed in the first place, or she shouldn't have signed until Dana apologized. She signed anyway, fought with them for the last handful of years, and her contract's now over, and she's looking to either sign a very short deal and just fight Amanda Nunes or sign with someone else. And with the way that she's handling things, it seems like she wants to sign somewhere else. One more quick thing to look at is the definition of sexual harassment, because this is one of the points that she's making, is that by saying that she would have to cut weight by cutting her dick off, or that she looked like Wanderlei Silva in a dress, that this would qualify as sexual harassment. So just to get the actual government definition of it before we move forward, I'll just read that off to you. So it says, for sexual harassment, it is unlawful to harass a person, not an applicant or employee, because of that person's sex. Harassment can include sexual harassment or unwelcome sexual advances, requests for sexual favors, and other verbal or sexual harassment of a sexual nature. So obviously this wasn't of a sexual nature. Harassment does not have to be of a sexual nature, so there we go. However, and can include offensive remarks about a person's sex. For example, it is illegal to harass a woman by making offensive comments about women in general. So I guess the idea would be like if I made a joke about how women should be in the kitchen. So if I was at work, I was like, hey, why don't you go to the kitchen right now? This is where you're supposed to be, right? That would technically be sexual harassment. Then it says both victim and the harasser can be either a man or a woman, and the victim and harasser can be the same sex. Although the law does not prohibit simple teasing, offhand comments, or isolated incidents that are not very serious, harassment is illegal when it is so frequent or severe that it creates a hostile or offensive work environment, or when it results in adverse employment decisions, such as the victim being fired or demoted. So this line right here is the one that would apply most to this situation. So it says it doesn't prohibit simple teasing, offhand comments, or isolated incidents that are not very serious. So first off, I would have to say that if she's pulling up this example and the example from the podcast, you could argue that they're isolated incidents or offhand comments. You could call them that. It's also worth noting that those comments were made before she was in the UFC. She was under contract with another promotion at the time, I believe. So it's not like she was either an applicant or an employee at the time. So for her to claim sexual harassment, she would have to then claim that the comments that she's referring to aren't the most recent, that there are more recent comments about her looking like Wanderlei Silva in a dress, or that deal with her supposedly having a dick and having to chop it off to make weight. And there's really no proof that that's happened since she's actually been a UFC fighter. So on to her actual Twitter thread. It really seems like right now she is trying to just create a giant PR mess for the UFC. And I guess if you feel like you've been wrong, that's one thing to do. It's probably not going to help her get a deal, though.
When I saw her at the MMA Awards, she looked like Wanderlei Silva in a dress and heels. And she did. Didn't she not? Who wants to dispute that she didn't look like Wanderlei? She got up and she was like walking up the stairs.
Do before you have Cyborg have her first fight in the UFC, have Tony roast her.
That'd be amazing. I don't even know where I'd begin. Where would I start? Probably
her dick.
She's the only person that cuts weight by chopping off her dick.
I said.
Yeah, so those are the two lines that she's really bugged out about. And the tweet that she put out says, every woman deserves the right to go to go to work in an environment free of sexual harassment, which we already discussed, online bullying, and workplace intimidation. So again, these things happened before she was signed with the UFC, so it's hard to classify them as any of the three. So if she is going to claim that these things happened while she was with the UFC, then okay, that's more interesting. Let's go ahead and prove that that was the case. But if your contention is that this happened before she signed with the UFC, you signed with the UFC anyway without getting an apology. You went through your contract, and now you want an apology before you could sign with them again. It sort of comes up as an issue. And it's obvious with the language that she's using, and if you know what kind of people are in the MMA media, this is sort of a call to a political cause that they would seem to like. And as you would imagine, a handful of them decided, hey, good idea, Cyborg. I will go ahead and talk about how the UFC isn't handling this right. But in addition to that, if you look at some of her other Twitter activity, here is her pulling up some stuff about Brock Lesnar getting paid through Death Clutch, which I guess is this thing that they found in some filing where they think that there was some impropriety on that end. That they're really early in the news cycle on that, so I really won't get too deep into that. I think there's a lot more to dig into before you can really say that anything wrong happened there. Same issue here. But again, that's supposed to make the UFC look bad, and so she's retweeting it. Just a poll about where she should fight next. Just a tweet or a little stat about her outstriking Felicia Spencer by quite a bit. Here was a blue checkmark journalist responding to the whole sexual harassment thing, saying that this bullying is just so effective. It's bullying plain and simple. I don't know if you ever bullied, but I'm sure you know that it can impact someone, especially in their place of work. Well, again, this didn't happen where she was working because she wasn't working with the UFC at the time. There's her saying that she needs a apology from Joe Rogan and Dana White if she wants to come back. Podcast is still online without edit, making excuse for things to say while drinking isn't an apology. So she wasn't happy with the apology that Joe Rogan made back in 2015. Again, she didn't fight in the UFC until 2016. The podcast is still online. How's that an apology? Well, there's no point in censoring it. So I guess if that's what you want, then whatever. It's also worth mentioning that one of the points that she makes why this is so upsetting to her is that apparently she has her kids told, oh, hey, your mom looks like a man. The whole Cyborg looks like a man thing existed far before Joe Rogan and Dana White made those comments. It's just by them making it as well, I guess it sort of made people think it's more okay. I don't know who these people are. I think if you thought that it'd be okay in the first place, I don't think you need to Joe Rogan and Dana White to say it, but that's her case. But if you just look at all the tweets that she's talking about, it's just a lot of grievances towards the UFC. So it's still uploaded without an edit. Again, I don't know why you feel like it has to be edited. Here is the apology from Joe Rogan. If I had to do it again, I definitely wouldn't have made the joke. We had a couple drinks and we were joking around about it. I had a couple drinks. It was just a dumb thing to do, and I certainly didn't mean it with any malice. I honestly didn't. Still, I shouldn't have done it. I shouldn't have said it. I do feel bad about it because I didn't want to hurt her feelings. Anyway, I didn't mean to start any static with her or anything like that. I hope she accepts my apology. It's my fault, and I take full responsibility. So Cyborg wasn't happy with that apology. She felt like it was more of an excuse, like, oh, I was drunk, rather than it was just a clean apology. I guess you could make an argument in that direction. That's the point she's making there, again, saying you had a couple drinks. Here is that initial tweet talking about sexual harassment. This is so horrible. I'm so sorry you had to go through this, Cris. Unreal how some men are treating female athletes who are strong and powerful and intimidate them. We have seen this before with other great women in sports. Unacceptable. And then tagging ESPN because I guess the hope is that ESPN is going to do something to Dana White about it. Again, it's worth mentioning, if you're going to try to claim the UFC sexist, you then have to say that this happens with a lot of other female fighters, given that they have 4 different divisions that are for female fights. And it seems like it just happens to Cyborg, so it seems like it's more of a Cyborg issue than a UFC-specific issue. Just a couple other notes, though. I'll just go through her record really quick, just to show when she did start in the UFC. I believe the banner said UFC 172. Dana White was standing in front of when he made the Cyborg an address comment, and she started at UFC 198. So, again, this predates her. If you look at the rankings, and this is what's interesting to me, is that in the rankings right now, there isn't really a featherweight division. So in what she's doing, it seems like the UFC is really only interested in having her fight against Amanda Nunes. But for the UFC, you really kind of don't feel the need to bring Cyborg back because Nunes did have that dominant win. Because with Nunes having that win, if they keep 145 and have Nunes as a champ, then okay, you have the person who beat Cyborg. If you keep 145 and Nunes gets beat, well, then someone beat the person who beat Cyborg. And if you just cut away 145, well, then there'd be no need for Cyborg anyway because she's not making 135. So seems like she's pretty upset. It seems like she's probably not going to sign with the UFC, but we'll see.